The year is 1961. The world is gripped by tension and uncertainty. The Cold War casts a long, ominous shadow over the globe, affecting every corner of the world. The United States and the Soviet Union face off, locked in an intense ideological struggle that pits democracy against communism. The threat of nuclear annihilation looms large, with both superpowers amassing arsenals capable of global destruction. In this tense climate, a small island nation in the Caribbean becomes a focal point of global attention. Cuba, just 90 miles off the coast of Florida, undergoes a dramatic revolution that will change its destiny. In 1959, Fidel Castro seizes power, promising to transform the nation. He overthrows the U.S.-backed dictator Fulgencio Batista, ending years of oppressive rule. Castro's alignment with the Soviet Union sends shockwaves through the United States, raising alarms in Washington. Embracing communist ideology, Castro forms close ties with the Soviet Union, solidifying his position and ideology. This new alliance poses a direct and immediate threat right at America's doorstep, just a short distance from its shores. The U.S. government, already deeply concerned about the spread of communism, views this development with increasing alarm. As tensions escalate, the stage is set for a dramatic confrontation that will test the resolve of both nations. The Bay of Pigs invasion, a covert operation aimed at toppling Castro, will become a pivotal event in the Cold War narrative. This ill-fated mission will expose the risks of covert operations and highlight the volatile nature of superpower rivalry, leaving a lasting impact on international relations. The Central Intelligence Agency, or CIA, plays a central role in the Bay of Pigs invasion, a pivotal moment in Cold War history. Established in 1947, the CIA operates in the shadows, conducting secret missions and gathering intelligence to safeguard U.S. interests. It gathers intelligence and conducts covert operations to protect U.S. interests abroad, often engaging in activities that remain classified for decades. The agency views Castro's regime with suspicion and hostility, seeing his rise to power as a direct threat to American influence in the Western Hemisphere. It sees him as a Soviet puppet and a threat to U.S. security, especially given the close ties between Cuba and the Soviet Union during the Cold War. President Dwight D. Eisenhower, concerned about the spread of communism, authorizes the CIA to develop a plan to overthrow Castro and curb Soviet influence in the region. The CIA devises a plan to train and arm a group of Cuban exiles, hoping to create a force capable of toppling Castro's government. This paramilitary force, known as Brigade 2506, will invade Cuba, aiming to spark a revolution. Their mission is to incite a popular uprising against Castro and install a pro-US government, which they believe will be welcomed by the Cuban people. The plan relies on secrecy, deception, and the assumption that the Cuban people will rise up against Castro, believing that his regime is deeply unpopular. However, it is based on flawed intelligence and a miscalculation of Castro's support for Cuba. The CIA underestimated the loyalty and resilience of Castro's followers, leading to a disastrous outcome. The Bay of Pigs invasion ultimately fails, becoming a significant embarrassment for the United States and a rallying point for Castro's regime. The failed invasion has lasting repercussions, straining U.S.-Cuban relations and intensifying Cold War tensions. Decades later, declassified documents reveal the extent of the CIA's involvement and the missteps that led to the operation's failure. Historians continue to study the Bay of Pigs invasion, seeking to understand the complexities and lessons of this Cold War episode. On April 17, 1961, Brigade 2506 lands on a beach called Playa Girón in the Bay of Pigs. The invasion force consists of around 1,400 Cuban exiles. They are ill-equipped and poorly trained for the task ahead. The invasion plan quickly falls apart. The element of surprise is lost. Castro's forces are well prepared. They are waiting for the exiles on the beaches. Air support, crucial for the success of the invasion, is inadequate. President John F. Kennedy, who had recently taken office, cancels a planned second wave of airstrikes. He fears escalating the conflict and provoking a wider war with the Soviet Union. Without air cover, the invaders are left vulnerable. Castro's forces, backed by Soviet tanks and aircraft, quickly gain the upper hand. The invasion becomes a disaster for the United States. The Cuban exiles are outnumbered and outgunned. They face fierce resistance from Castro's forces and the Cuban people. Within 72 hours, the invasion is crushed. Over 100 exiles are killed in action. The remaining members of Brigade 2506 are either captured or forced to flee. The Bay of Pigs becomes a humiliating defeat for the United States. It exposes the limitations of covert operations and damages the country's reputation on the world stage. Section 5. The price of failure, repercussions for the United States and Cuba. The failed invasion has immediate and long-term repercussions for both the United States and Cuba. It strengthens Castro's grip on power and deepens his distrust of the United States. In the aftermath of the invasion, Castro turns to the Soviet Union for protection. He formally declares Cuba a socialist state and welcomes Soviet military aid. The United States faces international condemnation for its role in the invasion. The incident is widely seen as an act of aggression against a sovereign nation. It damages U.S. relations with Latin American countries, many of whom see it as an example of U.S. imperialism. Section 6. A legacy of distrust. The invasion's impact on U.S.-Cuban relations. The Bay of Pigs invasion casts a long shadow over U.S.-Cuban relations. It creates a legacy of distrust and hostility that persists for decades. The United States implements a trade embargo against Cuba in 1962. The embargo, which remains in place for over 50 years, severely restricts trade and travel between the two countries. Diplomatic relations between the United States and Cuba are severed. The two countries become Cold War adversaries separated by ideology and mistrust. Section 7. Ghosts of the Bay of Pigs. The invasion's influence on U.S. foreign policy. The Bay of Pigs invasion has a profound impact on U.S. foreign policy. It makes the United States more cautious about overt military interventions in Latin America. The Kennedy administration, deeply embarrassed by the failure of the invasion, seeks to avoid similar fiascos in the future. It adopts a more nuanced approach to dealing with communist movements in the region, focusing on economic aid and diplomacy rather than military force. The CIA's reputation is tarnished by the Bay of Pigs debacle. The agency faces intense scrutiny and criticism for its role in planning and executing the invasion. Section 8. The Cold War's tightening grip. How the invasion fueled global tensions. The Bay of Pigs invasion occurs at a critical juncture in the Cold War. It exacerbates tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union. The invasion convinces Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev of the United States' willingness to use force to prevent the spread of communism. This belief contributes to his decision to place nuclear missiles in Cuba in 1962, leading to the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Cuban Missile Crisis brings the world to the brink of nuclear war. It underscores the high stakes of the Cold War rivalry and the dangers of miscalculation and escalation. Section 9. A cautionary tale, lessons from the Bay of Pigs. The Bay of Pigs. Invasion serves as a cautionary tale about the perils of covert operations and the unintended consequences of foreign intervention. This ill-fated mission, which took place in April 1961, was an attempt by the United States to overthrow the Cuban government led by Fidel Castro. The operation was planned and executed by the CIA with the support of Cuban exiles. It highlights the importance of accurate intelligence, clear objectives, and the need for thorough preparation. The failure of the invasion was partly due to flawed intelligence and unrealistic expectations. The planners underestimated the strength of Castro's forces and overestimated the support from the local population, and a realistic assessment of potential risks. The lack of a contingency plan and the overconfidence of the planners led to a disastrous outcome. The invasion force was quickly overwhelmed and many of the exiles were captured or killed. The invasion also underscores the importance of leadership and decision-making in times of crisis. President Kennedy, who had only been in office for a few months, faced intense pressure and criticism for the failure of the operation. President Kennedy's handling of the Bay of Pigs invasion, while criticized, provides valuable lessons in crisis management and the need for careful deliberation in matters of war and peace. He took responsibility for the failure, which helped to restore some of his credibility. The legacy of the Bay of Pigs invasion is complex and multifaceted. It had a profound impact on U.S. Cuba relations and contributed to the escalation of the Cold War. It is a reminder of the human costs of Cold War rivalry and the enduring impact of historical events on international relations. The invasion also served as a catalyst for future U.S. foreign policy decisions, emphasizing the need for better planning and more cautious approaches to international conflicts.